Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. Today, my guest is Courtney Moore, who is an intuitive healer that is trained in classical Chinese medicine. Courtney has her practice in San Francisco, where she offers bodywork, acupuncture, Reiki, and intuitive healing sessions to her clients all over the world. Today, we discuss the correlation between physical and emotional pain. Oftentimes, she was noticing with doing body work that she was fixing people with their body work, and then they would come back and have the same issues over and over again. It wasn't until they started diving deep into their emotional process, their feelings, and things that might have been buried for a long time, and they started to look at those, work through them, and resolve them. That's when their physical body started to heal and their physical symptoms started to disappear. I think in this day and age, we have our mental health system and our medical model, and they're completely separate and they really need to be gelled together. Oftentimes, when we have our physical symptoms, specifically pain, it has an emotional root. And so if we can go into those emotions, feel them, experience them, process them, then we can take control of our healthcare and we can oftentimes heal some of our physical symptoms and our physical pain. So I really hope that you'll find some benefit from this podcast. I really enjoyed this. I found it super inspiring. And if you are, take a moment to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And I want to thank you so much for being here today. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Courtney. Welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. I'm so happy to be chatting with you this morning.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you're in San Francisco. That's my old stomping ground. And you're an intuitive healer and you're trained in classical Chinese medicine. And so for people that aren't familiar with Chinese medicine, what is it? What is the background behind it and the education behind it?
Yeah, what I did was a 4-year master's degree. They've changed the qualifications since I graduated in 2012. So it's now a doctoral degree. I think it's 5 or 6 years. But I did the 4-year master's program. It's 1,000 clinical hours. In the state of California, where I am, we're considered primary care providers. And so we do a lot of training in Western medicine also. I can order blood work. I can run some basic muscle tests to determine what the injury is. It was pretty intensive. It was a lot. You have to obviously have a bachelor's degree before you apply for the master's.
And so for people that aren't familiar with Chinese medicine at all, and I am, because I did go to somebody for several years in the Bay Area, actually, for something, but what are the services that you provide? Because they're pretty vast. And what are the kind of things that people come to you for typically?
The primary services under Chinese medicine: acupuncture, Chinese herbs, body work or massage, sometimes qigong or tai chi, some kind of energy movement training, and diet or nutrition. Those are kind of the 5 branches of Chinese medicine. So those are the big pillars we use when we're working with folks. As far as conditions treated, Chinese medicine was the primary care for an entire continent for about 3,000 years. So it's literally designed to treat absolutely anything: mental health, physical health, acute problems, chronic problems. I think the way we learn it in the States, it's best suited for more chronic care. If you break a leg, don't come to me, go to the emergency room.
Right.
There's certain cases where I'd say try herbs, and some cases where I say go do antibiotics. Don't mess around with this. There's a reason medicine has evolved to include these other tools. So I really think acupuncture is great for any sort of more chronic pain, sometimes acute injury. Just know that acute injury is going to have the healing time that it takes. So if you sprain your ankle, if you break a bone, Chinese medicine might speed that up a little bit, but it's still going to be probably a 4 to 8 week process. And then honestly, I think Chinese medicine is great for anything spiritually related. So anxiety, depression, you're not happy in your relationships, you're bored at work. I think Chinese medicine has a way of really opening up your essence, your true nature, so that you can navigate all of that from a stronger place.
And I feel like when we talked initially, you said you were a medical intuit. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when I say I'm an intuitive healer trained in Chinese medicine, I do that partly because I don't just want to call myself an acupuncturist. I think people kind of put you in a box and they think, oh, that's what she does. She just puts needles in people.
Mm-hmm.
About 5 years ago, I started getting a lot of just intuitive hits and pictures when I was working with people. And so I did a lot of education to figure out how to use that efficiently and ethically. Like, what is this
Mm.
information? How is this really for someone's highest good? And part of that was medical intuitive training, which is where we sort of use our intuitive clairvoyant capacities to try to look inside the body and see what's going on from an energetic perspective, not just from this materialistic, what's the blood doing? How are the organs? That's a part of it, but all of that is driven by energy. So we're looking at the energy of emotions, relationships, old beliefs, past lives. But that's a big part of what I do is that medical intuitive piece.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is interesting in our country that we have like the medical model and then we have like the mental health model, and they're not merging and like they're causing issues for each other. Like if we have emotional issues that are unresolved, it creeps into our physical health. But if we have physical issues that are unresolved, like say a back pain or something like that, then that can create depression. So I would love to hear your perspective on all of this. And you and I talked before about kind of how you fell into the path that you're in, and how those link together for you in your practice.
I love those examples so much. Those are really good ones because that's exactly it. The physical affects the mental emotional, and the mental emotional affects the physical. And for some reason, our healthcare system really draws a line down the middle of those two. And I think that includes a lot of alternative care, even.
Hmm.
I think it's hard for people to recognize we're treating the whole person all the time. Everything we do is treating the whole person. So for me, when I started my acupuncture practice, and I was a body worker first, I did massage I've been doing it for about 20 years. Um, a couple things happened. The first is when you work with bodies for that long and that intensely, you have to start noticing the energy. It's just so in your face. I remember when I first started doing body work, I would do these really deep tissue massages and come home and just weep. And I didn't know
Mm,
why, but eventually I learned I was just picking up all of people's unpleasant
yeah.
emotions or difficult emotions. And, the empath in me was like, oh gosh, that looks so heavy. What if I take that for you? Oh, that's better. Now you can go. But then I had to deal with it. So I had to really like
Yeah.
learn how to navigate that. It was not good for me. The second thing I noticed is that people would come in and I would give them a treatment and it would help. Their headaches would get better, their neck pain would get better, their back pain would get better. And then I'd say, great, go back into the world. I'm glad you feel better. And then 2 weeks, 4 weeks later, they're on my table again with the same problem. And I'd realize in a way I
Hmm.
was enabling a lifestyle that was creating disease. So I was taking that pain away enough that they could go back to the job they hated, the relationship that wasn't working, the bad posture, the workouts that were too much for their body, whatever the thing was. I was taking the pain
Yeah.
away so they could keep doing the thing that was harming them. And that didn't
Yeah.
feel very good to me. I felt like an enabler, the same way, like if someone's an addict and you give them a drink, and I felt like that was part of what I was
Hmm.
doing. And so I wanted to really get to the root. I didn't want to be this technician who worked with these surface level symptoms. I wanted to figure out why is this pain happening and what do we have to shift so that it's like truly out of someone's life. In my evolution, I've learned that sometimes it really is a kindness just to be that technician and take the pain away. Sometimes it's not my
Hmm.
business. Sometimes there's like a bigger karmic thing happening. And if I can just help this person have a little less suffering as they navigate this crazy life, I've done my job. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's like a place for deeper inquiry. I remember a few times in my practice now, I've been working on someone's hips and their partner just jumps into my mind. I just have to ask about their
Mm,
husband or their boyfriend. And every time I've done that, they start weeping and there's some major
mm,
relationship thing going on that they're not addressing.
yeah.
So I think part of it is just figuring out how to walk that line. When it's time for that deep inquiry, we want to, turn over all the rocks and see what's going on. And when it's time just to provide some solace, just to really help someone, again, suffer less.
Mm. It's funny that you mentioned hips because I'm a yoga teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years, and we always talk about how we store these emotions in our hips. And a lot of times with the hip release exercises, there's an emotional release as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. That was one of my first introductions to this line of thinking in my personal life. I had a very difficult childhood, and I ended up doing a ton of Bikram yoga when I was 22 years old, like 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
I was super addicted. And I would get into some version of pigeon pose. I don't do that in Bikram, but it was some big hip opener. And I would just want to run away. I would want
Mm,
to cry and run away. And sure enough, that's how I dealt with my relationships. At that 23-year-old
yeah.
point of my life, I just wanted to run away from any kind of intimacy and vulnerability. And a yoga teacher friend opened up that connection for me. And it was really game changing. Here's the thing, I think when we learn to listen to those messages our body is sending us, then we have this really rich data, this vocabulary for how our human experience is affecting our spirit. And I think
Yeah.
the body is this incredible vehicle, mirror, like way to show you what your experience actually is, even if the conscious mind isn't recognizing all of that.
Yeah. I feel that like whenever I get sick or something happens or like a friend gets sick, I always feel like sometimes it's our body saying, "Oh, you didn't rest? Well, I'm going to make you rest now."
Absolutely. You got to
I'm going
slow
to stop
down.
you. You need to
Yeah.
take a break. You need to take a chill pill. Or also um then it's in those moments where we take everything for granted and then
Yeah.
we realize how much we've taken everything for granted. Yeah.
Yeah. I often refer to Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. That's one of my
Mhm.
favorites. And he
Mhm.
takes
Mhm.
that concept you just said to the next level. So I think it's absolutely right. When people get a cold, it's like, you got to slow down. You have to rest. You're not doing it. So your body's
Yeah.
going to slow you down. But the same goes if you have an autoimmune disease, if you have cancer, if you have, some of these bigger forced
Yes.
pauses or forced slowing downs. Um, there's something there for you also. There's something there for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do that too. There's an autoimmune thing that I have that pops up every once in a while. And when it does, I'm literally the first thought is, okay, what is the emotional component? What is happening here? Why is it coming up now? Because I feel like if I look back in the history of my life when I've had big illnesses or things pop up or I was hospitalized or something like that, it definitely correlated with this emotional component in my life that I was running from. That's where I want to lead into this conversation. I have a lot of friends with chronic illness, and I've always been
Mm-hmm.
under the idea that with something that's chronic, that it's something that's unresolved in our body. That if we
Mm-hmm.
were to just, not that it's easy, but to dive into the depths of our emotions and work through some of that, then I think some of those body pains and aches and chronic illnesses would dissipate.
I think that's exactly right. And I think one of the things complicating that is the way we're really conditioned and trained and desired to move away from pain instead of towards it. And so
Hmm.
if there's a pain in the body, we want to numb it. We want to run from it. We want to use painkillers. We want to do anything to not have that pain instead of
Hmm.
going towards the pain and being really curious about it. Why is this happening? Why is this coming up in my body right now? What do I feel here? If I get really quiet and I sit with this, what else arises in me? It's not a
Hmm.
very comfortable process. It's not always a very linear process, but I think it's so valuable if you really want to take that pain. Rumi says these pains you feel are messengers. Listen to them. I think it
Hmm.
takes a lot of courage to listen, but the payoff is so great also.
Yeah. When you're talking about that, it makes me think of migraines. I don't get them and I can't imagine how awful they are. But that would
Mm.
be one where we want to like numb it out and take some pills and knock out our migraine and stay in a dark room and just disappear from it. But in those moments going into that, like what is the reason that this is manifesting now in my life? What is the message I'm trying to get? And yeah, I like that. Instead of running away from the pain, going into it and getting curious about it and exploring it. And I'm wondering why that's so hard for people. Why we tend to avoid that and not go in that direction.
Well, pain is not fun. It's not pleasant. Like I
Yeah.
had a lot of loss in this past year. My father died and I ended a 4-year relationship
Mm.
and I terminated pregnancy and there was
Oh
just
my
so much
gosh.
loss and pain all at once. And I didn't want to
Mm.
feel any of that. I could feel my heart so tight and this like stabbing pain in my heart. But to get that to go away, I'd have to go towards that terrible feeling. I didn't want to do that.
Mm.
It took a lot of work for me to
Yeah.
have sort of like the courage and the resources. I think I think in any healing journey, safety is like the first thing we need. We need to feel safe. And a
Yeah.
lot of us don't feel safe for whatever reason, our upbringing, the situation we're living in currently, the state of the world. And I think you have to establish that safety for yourself before you can really do that sort of deep dive journey into your psyche. You
Yeah.
have to have resources. You have to know that if something comes up that feels overwhelming, you're going to be okay. You're supported. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think there's this common myth that we're going to open something, we're going to open the floodgate, and then we're not going to be able to shut it. We're not going to be able to have control over it. And I always feel like we're just given exactly what we can handle, even though sometimes it might feel like we can't handle it. That's a common thing for a lot of people, is that they think, oh, if I open this floodgate, it'll never ever shut again.
Exactly. For me, it feels like a tidal wave. Like I can see the tsunami
Mm,
coming at me, and I feel like
yeah.
I have to find a way to ward it off, because if that thing crashes over me, I'm going to drown. And in the moments in my life when I've been able to process it, of course, it just crashes and moves on, and then the sea is calm after that.
Yeah.
But when you see it coming towards you, you can't imagine there's a calm ending to that giant storm.
Yeah. And I think when we do open it, it does come in waves, right? Like it comes and then it goes and it comes back and it comes in layers. But I think if we avoid it and we run from it, it keeps coming back. And if it doesn't come up through emotions, then it comes out through our body. It comes out through dysfunction. It comes out through addiction. It comes out. It comes
Yeah.
out somehow.
Absolutely. I think it's so right. And I love the saying, life sends pebbles and then rocks and then boulders. And
Mm,
a lot of physical conditions, I think, are boulders. They're sort of the last attempt of your being to express that something really needs to change. Because that's the other thing with pain and with some of these messages. A lot of times they're asking you to make a change in your life that might be really upsetting to the status quo, to your emotions, to other people in your life. And so if part of what's arising is that, hey, guess what, your partnership is over, it has reached its shelf life, you need to go separate directions, you might really fight that message. You might say, I would rather live with chronic neck pain and migraines than deal with ending my marriage. And that's a choice we
mm.
all make, but I guess my hope is that people make that consciously, instead of just living with the migraines and wondering why they get these terrible migraines while continuing to be in a relationship that's not for their highest good.
Yeah. And I guess when we're talking about like chronic pain and things that keep coming back over and over again, or things that are debilitating, versus you have an injury, you move through it, and then it doesn't come back again.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The migraines is an interesting example, because I've always learned that migraines are a block in your sixth chakra. So there's like a way the
Mm.
information is trying to come in and you're just not allowing it to come in. In some ways, it's like the perfect example of what we're talking about, right? The information is really trying to be seen and you won't see it.
Which is kind of ironic, because the way to kind of get rid of that migraine would be to go into a dark room, to isolate, to get rid of the stimulation, right? And to go internally, which makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I get really quiet with it.
Mm. How do you encourage people to do that when it seems so scary?
Well, again, I think the first step is to find your safety and your resources. And
Mm.
so I often think that means having practitioners in your Rolodex, whether that's a therapist, an acupuncturist, a coach, an intuitive. It can be anyone. I think having multiple someones is nice, so that you really feel like you've established relationships with people you trust and people who can hold you as you're going down this road. It can also just be people in your life, best friends or partners, or people who are going through something similar in some kind of support group. But I think you have to establish like a communal aspect to the support. And I think you have to establish a somatic place for support. So, how do you find peace and comfort in your body? For me, it's a lot of yoga and meditation and the occasional bath. For other people, it might be getting massages, going for long walks in nature, spending time with plants, gardening. It's unique for everyone, but I think those are the two big pieces. Like, find that communal support and find the thing that helps your body feel calm. And then you're feeling resourced as you start to explore these difficult things.
Yeah, as you're listing those things off, what I realized is that a lot of those things that you listed off are things that we do in a solo journey, where
Mhm.
sometimes I think for me, I need to burn off energy at the gym, but that is not leaning into what you're talking about, right? Um, it might burn off some energy. It might be good for me, but the things that you mentioned, taking a bath, going for a walk, yoga, meditation, those kinds of things are introspective. So I think
Mhm.
sometimes we can get our energy out through those bursts and think that maybe that's a way that we're burning it off, but there's no introspection in going to the gym and standing on the Stairmaster.
I think that's okay though, because what I'm really talking about is finding tools to feel good in your body. And I think
Mm,
for a lot of people, that release you get at the gym, on the treadmill, or whatever else does help you feel
yes.
better in your body. And so
Yes.
the journey is one thing. The journey is where you have this introspection and you have this courage and you're really being an investigator. But separate from the journey, it's like, how do you find safety and comfort and sort of like a rootedness in yourself so that you can go back to the journey when you're ready for it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, yes, I need the gym for so many different reasons, but then there's also the other piece I need as well for that to be balanced. The
Yeah.
gym can't fill that need for me completely.
Yeah. Yin and yang. There's always a balance.
So when people come to you, how do you use your like medical intuition to move them into like self-realization or self-awareness?
I have joked for a while that I'm really good at sort of digging up the thing for people, but then I give it to them and tell them, go work on this with a therapist or a coach or some mental health professional, because I'm not that, right? I'm
Hmm.
an excavator, but I don't do well with, I don't have the training to process a lot of things. So for me, this gift is I can look at someone's energy field and sort of like pluck out the thing that they haven't been looking at, that for some reason their spirit's ready to process. I feel very strongly that in the work I do, I'm talking to people's spirit guides, to their higher self, to the other forces that are guiding our journeys. And so whatever information I'm getting it for a reason. I'm getting it because
Yeah.
you are ready to actually process it. You are ready to have
Mm.
a different experience than the one you've been having. And so I often in my readings, I look for sort of like the core picture someone's ready to shift, the one they've been running on that isn't working for them, and the growth period they're going into. So, how do they grow out of that old, outdated picture to find something that works better for them?
So can you give me an example of somebody that's come in, say, for something completely unrelated, and how that journey's unfolded for them through your work?
I mean, that's kind of everyone, right? People come to me generally for physical pain. Sometimes there's a
Hmm.
mental, emotional pain also, but usually physical pain. So I'm working with a gentleman now who had all kinds of pain: headaches, neck pain, back pain, joint pain. Um, he was getting steroid injections. He was working with a chiropractor. He was getting cupping. He saw his doctor all the time. Just a lot of physical pain.
Yeah.
And the first reading I did with him, I looked at his body and I just saw so much anger. Like his entire body was rage. And it was like rage that didn't have a vent. There was no outlet for that rage. He had to like hold it all in. And
Mm.
we've been working together for, I guess, maybe 6 or 8 months now. And that has evolved where first we were doing a lot to clear anger and rage, which is a physical vibration too. So herbs really helped with that. We did a lot of bleeding on like his ears to release some of that anger that's coming up. It didn't have a place to go once it got to the top. Um, and now underneath anger, I think it's very important to address anger. This is a little bit of a controversial topic in the alternative health world. Some people say you always want to get to what's under the anger. And I think that's
Hmm.
true, but I also think anger is a primary emotion. It's an energy in the body. Like again, we had to get that out of the way. And
Yeah.
now we're finding all of his insecurity, all of his fear, all of the wounding from his mother, who clearly didn't have time or energy to actually nurture him. And so he had to learn to nurture himself, or more accurately, to doubt that anyone would ever nurture him. And that as an adult manifested as a lot of anger that no one could meet his needs, anger that every
Yeah.
relationship failed because he was missing this piece of the puzzle. His pain is a lot better now. It's not 100% cured, but he's definitely a lot more, he has less sort of acute attacks like the migraines. And he has more tools where if he is in pain, we can start to work with some of the emotional stuff. And he might not need to resort to like a cortisone shot to get out of pain.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. It makes me think of this underlying idea that everybody's holding these limiting beliefs underneath everything. And it's typically something like, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. And it seems to be that almost everything leads back to those avenues of the limiting beliefs that are something we've held on to since we were like a small child.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I mean, I think so much of psychology is based on exactly that. Let's get to the sort of core wounding, the core belief that is driving these behaviors or relationships that don't really work for you, don't really serve you. And if we see them, if we bring consciousness to them, what might shift in your life? Even if you don't change the belief, even can you see it and be aware of
Yes.
how it's running the show? Then what
Yes.
might shift?
Yes. Right. Because it
Yeah,
might not be so easy to shift a limiting belief that's been there for 40 years, but
totally.
just having the awareness around it and how it manifests. And then if something happens and you feel a wound and you're like, oh, that's my limiting belief.
Yeah,
Yeah. The
exactly.
awareness creates healing in itself.
Right. Or you're dating and you're like, oh, I'm picking that person because of the belief. Like maybe I don't want to pick that person. Maybe I don't want to have that experience for the umpteenth time.
Yeah. I'm assuming that you found some people that have come to you for, say, chronic pain, and then all of a sudden they realize the root of this and they start working on it, and it's really empowering them to take control over their lives. Where I think when you're in chronic pain, you feel a lack of control, like you're the victim of everything that's happening to you. And then when you start helping your physical health and your mental health, then there's an element of control that you have over that. And then that must be really empowering for people to realize that they play a role in their health, like play such a deep role in their health.
I think it absolutely can be. I think that term victim is at the core of why this work doesn't work for some people, because a lot of
Mm,
people aren't ready to step out of that victim feeling for
yeah.
various reasons. And I don't want to make them wrong for that. In my practice, I've learned that, like, well, I can't help you if you're still stuck in that victim place. If you're not
Yeah.
willing to really take responsibility for absolutely everything in your life on some sort of karmic level, then there's going to be blocks to what you're able to explore and your ability to feel that empowerment and that agency, because you're absolutely right, that's the goal of this work, is to have
Hmm.
you be back in the driver's seat, back at the helm. But I think that victim energy is really tricky for a lot of people. It's really hard to get out of that place.
Yes. And then yes. And I have some people in my life that are in that, and it's hard to watch, and it's hard to be able to see it so clearly and want to be able to help and know that it's completely in their hands, and that hopefully they'll have this shift in awareness, but they might not. It's hard to watch. It's hard to
It's
watch
really
for people
hard.
we love, our friends and our family.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for me as a practitioner. I so deeply want to help everyone who comes into my office. I have a couple of people right now who are just so stuck. They can't. I don't understand it to this day in my 20-year career. Even in my own healing journey, there were moments that the only reason something shifted, the word that comes to me is grace. I don't know how or why I got out of that pattern, but grace allowed me to take a step. And I see some folks who are just so stuck on that rut, and I don't know when grace is going to help them out of it. I don't know what or why they're going to choose something different, but I know until they do, they're not going to see a change.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine as a practitioner, that's really hard. Yeah.
That's really hard. Yeah.
I mean, I was a social worker for many years, and I felt like there were people that came that were ready to like do the hard work.
Right.
And that was the minority of the people.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder how we can empower or push people a little bit. I guess we just can't. You just have to wait until they're ready.
I think that's it. You set the table, and when they're ready, they sit down and have their meal. But all we can do is set that table really well for them.
Do you feel like all physical pain has an emotional root?
It's such a good question. I've had a lot of discussions with some colleagues about this. I really do. I really do. I think some of that root might not be apparent. I mean, again, I'll go to the deep woo where there might be some past life situation. There might be some, out of body being who's affecting you. But I think anything physical has a correlative, energetic, emotional aspect.
Yeah.
I think
And
the
that's,
physical, like plane, the physical energy is like the most condensed form of energy. And so for something to reach that condensed state, there was like an energetic blueprint that is at the basis of the condensation.
like a block,
It can be
or
a
like
block.
or something stagnant, or something stuck, or something needing to be released.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the basis of a lot of the Chinese meridian system, right? You've got like channels of energy in your legs that are
Yeah.
linked to parts of your abdomen, different organs. And it's like that's the less condensed version of this condensed energy that is an organ.
And that's what I was thinking of with the Chinese medicine, the acupuncture. I'm wondering if you found people that are ready, that are doing the work, but then there's this energetic block in their body, and through acupuncture you're able to release those blocks, and then there's like a clear flow of energy. Does that make sense at all?
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. And I love my remote patients, but there are definitely moments where I just want to get them on my table because the way I see it, you do all this inner work, you do all this emotional excavation, you do all this growing internally, and there's still this physical vibe that you're living in, this rut that
Yeah.
has been your reality for a long time. And I really do think you often need something external, like a practitioner, to change that physical thing once you've done the internal work. So I think a lot of people are kind of hitting their head against a wall because they're going to a practitioner before doing the internal work. And that's when the
Yeah.
massage feels better for like an hour or two, or like, oh, the acupuncture didn't really work for me. But you have to do that internal work either before or concurrently. And then when someone comes in and makes that adjustment, it's exactly what you said. It's like finally we can release it and there's a whole new pattern that can come
And do you feel that? Do they feel that when that
in.
block is open and that energy is released?
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
really cool. I think you can feel it, but also your life shows up differently. That's when you finally meet someone in a coffee shop who's exactly who you've been looking for, or you finally get the job that you've been really wanting, but you didn't even apply for it. It just like landed in your lap. I think when you move that energy in your body, all of the energy in your life starts to fall into place also.
Yeah. And I'm starting to realize that this is like a constant piece of work that we need to do. It's not like you unblock everything and you're like good to go. Like things layer on top of us slowly, emotions layer, and people's energies layer on us, and it's this constant self-awareness and this constant process of shedding in order to get to that. We can't maintain that state all the time.
It's such an important point. I'm so glad you said that. I know I can really fall into the trap of thinking like, that's it. I did it. I did my work. I'm clear. Life
Hmm.
is smooth sailing from here. And it does not happen that way. You are absolutely right. Um, and that's part of why I feel like establishing a practice where you're doing this sort of inner work. To me, it's meditation, but there's meditation can mean 100 different things, right? But for me,
Yeah.
some kind of meditative practice is the place where you check in with your body, check in with yourself, see what's there, what kind of content is asking for your attention, and just
Yeah.
give yourself attention. I think, again, meditation is a practice of attention.
Yeah. It happens so quickly. A couple of days ago, I realized I had been having insomnia for like last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, really bad insomnia, and I couldn't figure it out. And somebody mentioned Insight Timer. And then I just hit me that I had been meditating every single night for months. And we went on this trip to Africa for whatever. And my routine got thrown. And so for 3.5 weeks, I didn't do any meditating. And this light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, no wonder I've got insomnia. Like I quit meditating, and it just happened. It just like it just happened without me even noticing. And it was her saying insight timer. And I was like, oh, that's why that we need to constantly keep up that practice. And it slipped out so quickly without me even noticing.
Yeah. And those practices are so critical and so hard to maintain, right? And
Hmm.
our lives get busy so quickly, and there are so many distractions and a lot of other things we probably want to consciously be doing that aren't meditation. But the payoff's really great, I think, if you can create, establish, stick to a practice.
Yeah. And then spending time alone to get curious and inquire about what's going on inside. I think that's
Mhm.
pretty frightening for a lot of people, just to
Right.
be in silence without, your phone nearby, and just to reflect. Um, I think a lot of people avoid that. I avoid
Yeah.
that at times for sure.
Absolutely. And for a lot of people who are newer to that kind of experience or practice, I really recommend they start with a retreat of some kind, because I think if you don't have any meditation background and you just try to jump into being quiet and present with yourself, all of the hard voices, the critical voices, the
Hmm.
anxious voices, they can just take over. So you're just sitting with all your hard voices for 20 minutes. And I've seen that be really hard on people. You come out of that
Yeah.
20 minutes, you don't feel calm and centered and aware. You just feel like you've been attacked, for 20 minutes. You've been with
Yeah.
your attackers. And so I really, really strongly encourage you to have some kind of guidance. I love a meditation retreat for this. I think it's a great
Yeah.
kickstart. I think everyone has the capacity for it. I think those teachers, bless them, they have this incredible way of holding space and guiding someone through this very powerful journey. Um, so I'll just plant that seed for all your listeners who are thinking about starting meditation.
Yeah.
Find a teacher, find some kind of guidance to really get you started with it.
And then there's a community too with that teacher. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the biggest lesson for me over the years that I've been meditating is realizing that um, I'm not just going to sit there and go into meditation and my mind's going to go blank for 30 minutes and it's going to be like that every single time. Sometimes I go and I can meditate every day for months, and then it's still, my mind might be very active and busy, but at least I can be observing it and not
Yes.
involved in the process. And then also those moments where we feel connected to source, we can't sit in that space all the time. And I used to think like, oh, that meditation practitioner is sitting in that bliss and that their mind is blank and they're there all the time. And that's not the case. It's a
Yeah.
constant practice, and it's shifting and it's changing. And it's being the observer of those shifts and changes without judgment, without being so hard on ourselves.
Yes.
Like, I'm a good
Absolutely.
meditator today. Like, I'm not meditating well today. Like, it's not about that.
Oh my gosh, you're so right about that. And that's a nice reminder for me. I've been meditating for a long time and I still get frustrated when I
Hmm.
meditate for 20 minutes and I was just spinning the whole time like, God, I didn't do it, but I did it. I totally did it. That's the practice, is to observe your mind and bring attention and awareness to yourself. And the real meditative practice to me is just coming back over and over and over again. So you set your intention to sit and to be present. Maybe you're focusing on your breath or your heart or something else, and then the mind wanders, and then you notice and you come back. And it's the coming back that's the
Yeah.
like gem of the practice to me.
Yeah. And as a yoga teacher too, it's like that, coming back to the breath, coming back to our body. You go in the
Yes.
flow and you start thinking about lunch. You're like, nope, come back to the breath, come back to the
Yes.
body. Right.
Yeah.
And just constantly pulling ourselves back and being gentle, and not being so self-critical when we wander, because that's part of that's our nature. That's the nature of the mind, is to drift. So it's just
Yeah.
noticing it and like, okay, like, we'll just gently bring you back over here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for some folks who are, starting with meditation and find it really difficult, a meditation that has a physical component, like a yoga practice or a walking meditation, can be a really good starting point, because sometimes you need a little extra reminder to come back to the physical thing that you have, your body, your
Yes.
breath. And that's
Yes.
absolutely fine. I don't think a moving meditation or a walking meditation is inferior to a sitting meditation.
No.
They're all beautiful practices.
Yeah. I actually really love this one where you use your hands and you inhale, and then on the exhale you touch like your thumb to your pinky, and then you
Mm-hmm.
inhale and then you exhale and you touch it to the next finger and you do that. And I've found that when you do pair breathing or meditation with a physical practice, it grounds you into your body so much more, and you don't tend to wander as quickly.
Absolutely. I love that so much. I think that's really, really valuable.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for people that are walking down this path of wanting to heal their pain? I know it's like community and meditation, those are awesome. But if it's super scary and we don't know where to start, like what are some other stepping stones that might be useful?
Well, for many of my patients who aren't ready to make that change or go on that journey, I have them just focus on how not making the change, going on the journey, negatively affects them. Because you
Mm,
need motivation, right? It is hard. You are absolutely right. It is hard to face our pain. It is hard to do some of this inner work. And why would you do that if you didn't have a very good reason to do it? And so
yeah.
if you're not there yet, find your good reason. To again use that example of folks who are addicted. How is your addiction affecting your relationships? How is it affecting your physical body? How is it affecting your
Mm,
hobbies, your mental health? Same for your pain. How is your pain affecting the way you show up in the world? And what would that look like if it was like no longer acceptable? Like
yeah.
what would your pain have to get to for you to say, I don't want to live with this anymore?
Yeah.
And just focus on that until you find whatever motivation you need to do something different.
Yeah. That makes me think of, I did a training and another take on that can also be, what is the positive payoff of the pain?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yes, when I'm in pain, I can avoid going to parties. When I'm in pain, is it worth it?
Yes.
And looking at the
Absolutely.
payoff, and there's always a positive to our negative patterns.
Right.
And then looking to see, is it really worth it? Is that payoff where I want to be?
I love that dual approach. What am I getting from this and what am I missing out on because of this? I think
Yeah.
that's really, really wise. And again, if people don't feel ready to face themselves yet, just leaning into those two questions can bring a lot of awareness. And once you have that awareness, you can just make a more informed decision for yourself.
Yeah. And writing it down. I've been an anti-journaler, anti-writing things down for my whole life. And I've been practicing it lately and I have to force myself to do it. But it is interesting how much like of the unconscious mind comes through and how many nuggets come through when we just start writing that out, like writing out what is the payoff? What is the benefit? What is what am I missing out on? And if you can see that on a piece of paper, sometimes I think that's powerful for people.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of journaling. I also have some journaling inertia. It can be hard for me to get started, but it's kind of like yoga. I'm always glad I actually did it. Even if it's hard to get there,
Yes.
it's always a good idea in the end.
Yes. And like baby steps, right? Like you don't have to do yoga for an hour. You can do 5 minutes. You don't have to journal for 30 minutes. You can do like a moment of journaling. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we bite off more than we can chew and then we set ourselves up for failure.
Hmm. Expectations. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Courtney. How do people connect with you? What are some of your offerings? I know you're doing this 12-week course, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. And it's really all the things we just talked about. I try to think of in my practice, what are the tools that seem really useful for people as they're navigating this path? And how can I put that together in sort of like a self-guided course for people who don't have the time or resources to work with me one-on-one? So we start really by looking at the physical because I think, like we've said, the physical and emotional, mental are always playing off each other. So sometimes you really do have to make changes to your diet. You have to make sure you're sleeping enough. You have to make sure you're drinking enough water. So we start with the physical, and then the big three pillars of the program are awareness, which is some kind of journaling practice,
Hmm.
presence, and release. And so it's all about
Hmm.
understanding what energies are in the body. We look at the chakra system, the meridian system. We talk about what is pain, what is energy, and then finding the blockage. So if you have shoulder pain, really spending a lot of time meditating with your shoulder, scanning your shoulder, feeling your shoulder, seeing what comes up in your shoulder, And then the whole second half of the program are tools to release the energy you find. So it might be
Mm.
EFT or toning, journaling about boundaries, doing some sort of emotional release. But I think it's great. I've had a number of people go through it. They've all had some really cool insights. Everyone does 3 one-on-one sessions with me in the program. So that's my way of sort of
Yeah.
making sure you're on the right path. But yeah, that's available. It's called The Liberated Body. You can read about it on my website, CourtneyMooreWellness.com. I'm on Instagram, Courtney Moore Wellness. I'm on Facebook, Courtney Moore Wellness. If you go to my website at the bottom, you can join my newsletter. I try to send some intuitive medicine-based tips out a couple times a month for folks who are on this journey.
Mm.
Yeah, I would love to help people go deeper into that relationship with themselves. I think that is the ultimate aim
Yeah.
of any healing journey.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's
Yeah, I
wonderful.
appreciate this conversation, and I love this perspective and like diving into like what's causing pain, because pain is so prevalent in our society, and I love your perspective and your take on it. So thank you so much for our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nickyyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.